US correspondent James Matthews in New York, outside that courthouse. And, well, James, we've been listening to all sorts of debate about the legality of all this, but the next few minutes, the hearing itself will be quite something.
Yeah, quite the spectacle. I can tell you, Mark, that Nicolas Maduro is in court. I'm getting a written feed of events as they unfold, and I'll read it verbatim to you. This was from about 30 seconds ago. Maduro walks in and shakes hands with his attorneys. He's wearing an orange shirt with a blue shirt over it, beige pants, trousers, and orange slippers. He put on a headset so he could hear the translation. Cillia Flores, his wife, she's sitting 2 seats away, wearing similar prison garb, we are told. The judge, Alvin Hellerstein, 92 years old, Bill Clinton appointed in 1998. He enters, takes the bench. The case is called. Kyle Washbaum is appearing for the government, the prosecutor. Defending Maduro is Barry Pollack, one of the country's most successful, certainly high-profile defense attorneys, Mark. He's the man who negotiated the release from custody of the WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, represented him throughout the 15 years that he was behind bars. Part of that, of course, was in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. So Barry Pollack has been appointed to represent Maduro, at least for today. One of the issues going forward will be who ultimately does act on his behalf and how he pays for it. A man who is under sanctions in the United States and, of course, whose assets are frozen. Mark Donnelly is the defense attorney appearing on behalf of Cillia Flores, we are told. The judge says, "Good morning, Ms. Flores. Good morning, counsel. I am Alvin Hellerstein, U.S. District Judge assigned to this case. My job is to ensure this is a fair trial, and that is my job and intent, to summarize the indictment." And that's what today is all about, Mark. It's an arraignment. The evidence, the charges will be laid out, and Maduro in time will be given an opportunity to enter a plea. The judge then is reading through some of the charges. Narco-terrorism conspiracy, that he knowingly conspired with others, the judge names them, conspired to manufacture and distribute controlled substances, intentionally provided material value to a person or organization engaged in terrorism or in terroristic activity. Count 2, Maduro and Ms. Flores, his wife, are charged with cocaine importation. That's the charge that the wife has been roped into. Cocaine importation conspiracy. They and others engaged in a conspiracy to import, manufacture and distribute controlled substances, cocaine, through various means unlawfully imported into the United States. That's the judge, Alvin Hellerstein, speaking right now, Mark. So it's underway. The Maduros came into court something like 5-6 minutes ago. Maduro put on a headset. He's listening to the translation of the judge's words. And there you are. He's reading out the charges right now, with drug running very much at the heart of that.
Yeah, as you say, and we're just hearing it, he walked in, shook hands with his lawyers. Maduro walked in, and now is sitting about 2 places away from his wife. But clearly it's underway. But as you say, James, an arraignment is essentially a short hearing, and it could be some time, am I right in saying, before the trial proper?
Yeah, it absolutely could. I mean, the expectation here is that we are settling in for a process that will take several years. This is the arraignment. It won't take very long. He will be taken back, we assume, to the Metropolitan Detention Centre, and then begins the process of pulling together the prosecution, ultimately a trial. That could be something like a year away, Mark, before we get to the stage where a jury is sitting down, listening to evidence and ruling on guilt or innocence. And then, of course, it may be that you have a series of appeals, counter-appeals, and so on. So, yeah, he's going to be a resident of the United States for some considerable time, Mark, and we will see the spectacle again. We'll see a repeat, a reverse, I suppose, of this morning's scenes when the Maduros are taken back to the Metropolitan Detention Centre. That notorious centre, notorious because it has been roundly criticised for insanitary, unsafe conditions inside. The Maduros, we understand, are being kept in this special housing unit in keeping with their profile. That's what's happened to the likes of Ghislaine Maxwell, Sean Diddy Coombs. That's where they were kept. That's where prisoners or accused individuals who are facing federal trial are kept in this area, the Southern District of New York. But right now, in this building 27 stories high, in courtroom 26A, in the federal courthouse, on the edge of Chinatown and lower Manhattan. Very busy area, the business of New York going on all around. You can hear it behind me, Mark. Extremely busy. Busy with a protest, actually, a protest at what took place in Venezuela. Many individuals here, members of the public, argue that it was inappropriate, that it was a breach of international law. We've heard that view on the street. I heard it yesterday in a demonstration outside the prison. That view finds an echo, I can tell you, on Capitol Hill, and there's been much discussion about concern that Congress was not consulted, concern that this was actually an act of war, and it needed the permission of US lawmakers before it proceeded. That's an ongoing conversation at a political level here amongst the American political set, and of course we have heard that being discussed at the United Nations throughout the course of the morning. So discussions continue outside of this courtroom, but events continue apace inside, and I'm just looking at the reports from inside. Maduro and Flores are charged with conspiracy. He's read through the indictment. Are you Nicolas Maduro Moros? Asks the judge. Maduro stands. He says there will be a time and a place for all of this. I only want to know one thing. Are you Nicolas Maduro Moros? Maduro answers. His first words publicly since arriving in the United States, I am. You have the right to read the entire indictment, the judge tells him. Barry Pollock, the attorney for Maduro, says he has an indictment and counsel has summarized it and he has waived formal reading. Maduro says, I have it in my hands for the first time. I would rather read it personally. And Maduro also says, I am the president of Venezuela. I was captured at my home in Caracas, Venezuela. So a statement from Nicolas Maduro that he very much remains president of Venezuela in his mind. And that's a statement he's made on his feet inside courtroom number 26A. The first time we have heard from Maduro, and that gives us a sense of where he is, his stance in all of this. The judge is continuing, Mark. He's saying if you cannot afford a lawyer, the government will provide one free of charge, and you can be released prior to trial unless I find reasons to hold you. Are you aware of this? Maduro says, I did not know of these rights, Your Honor. I did not know of these rights. Your Honor has informed me of them now. So discussion between the judge and Nicolas Maduro. I can tell you he will not be released on bail. That is a certainty in all of this. That's down to the judge to confirm that, of course. And the judge is going on to say to him, these are your rights to counsel. How do you plead? The judge asks Nicolas Maduro, how do you plead? Maduro says, I am not guilty. I am the president of my country. So there you are. Nicolas Maduro pleads inside a New York courtroom, and he pleads not guilty.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just looking at a very similar thing that you're looking to, which is this court document. Extraordinary stuff. It's clear, James, that Maduro is using this as an opportunity to speak publicly for the first time. He says he hasn't read the indictment personally, which is interesting, maybe difficult to believe. I've got it in front of me. It's 25 pages. And he probably won't enjoy reading it. For over 25 years, leaders of Venezuela have abused their positions of public trust and corrupted once legitimate institutions to import tons of cocaine into the United States. Nicolas Maduro, the defendant, is at the forefront of that corruption and has partnered with his co-conspirators to use his illegally obtained authority and the institutions he corroded to transport thousands of tons of cocaine to the United States. And then at the end of it, it shows those counts that have just been heard in court. Count 1, narco-terrorism conspiracy. Count 2, cocaine importation conspiracy. Count 3, possession of machine guns and destructive devices. Count 4, conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices. So I don't know what else you're reading now on that document, James, but it looks like it might go on a little bit longer than expected if Maduro continues to speak like this.
Yeah, and I can tell you in the past couple of minutes, he's got political mark. He asserts once more that he is not guilty, and he says this: I am not guilty. I am a decent man. I am still the president of my country. So from inside a New York courtroom, Nicolas Maduro having his say on the politics of all of this, and his very firm stance clearly is that he remains the president of the country, a president clearly in exile, and Donald Trump and the Trump administration, the US government, would take a very different view of whether or not he is the president. A decision taken out of Maduro's hands, but clearly he sees that as his ongoing status. Maduro has sat back down. He made those remarks on his feet, Mark, and I'm just looking. The judge says, my deputy will now arraign you. Maduro stands again, and he's asked, have you seen a copy of the indictment? I have seen a summary and partially spoken to my attorney. I waive and would rather read it personally, he says again. I am innocent. I am not guilty of anything that is mentioned here. Now, the judge says thank you, and he addresses Nicolas Maduro's wife. Miss Cillia Flores, please stand. Are you Cillia Flores? The judge asks. She answers, yes, I am Cillia Flores Maduro. I am the First Lady of Venezuela. So his wife echoing that sentiment from Nicolas Maduro, that they retain very much the status of President and First Lady. The judge asks her, you heard my summary of the indictment? You heard it? Yes, she says, my attorney received it. Yes, I did hear your summary. And she doesn't read it back. The judge is going on to ask her another question. So again, Mark, this is a written feed that we're getting from our reporter in court. Martha Kellner, my colleague and US correspondent, is inside court, and we will hear from Martha in due course when this is over. The judge is asking Cillia Flores, are these your attorneys? And she's answering, yes, they are here with me. A reminder, Mark, that Barry Pollack is the attorney representing Nicolas Maduro, well known and a successful defense attorney, represented Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks founder, and engineered his release ultimately after 15 years in fighting the charges against him. The judge is now going on to tell Cillia Flores, if you cannot afford a lawyer, the court will provide one free of charge. And he is asking her, how do you plead to counts 2, 3, and 4? Cillia Flores tells him, not guilty. completely innocent, she says.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, James, that Maduro is clearly defiant, clearly using this to get his message across. And what is it he said? I am not guilty, I'm a decent man, I am still president of my country. And it is worth reflecting, I guess, while this arraignment goes on, what a 48 hours it's been, because, or so, 48 hours or so, that it's been, because he was, you know, in the presidential palace, a man with unchecked power meeting a senior Chinese delegation one moment, and then the next moment he is being flown to the United States and appearing in court so quickly. I mean, it is quite some operation and quite some fall from grace.
It absolutely is, Mark. I mean, on Friday we were watching video of Maduro meeting a Chinese delegation amidst the opulence of his presidential palace in Caracas. The clock then, little did we know, was ticking on his freedom, because later that day, indeed in the middle of the night, 1 minute past 2 in the morning to be precise, that's when the Americans moved in. Absolute textbook military operation. They turned out the lights using cyber technology in Caracas and went in, took no casualties, and well, in the words of President Trump, and in the immortal line of President Trump, Maduro, as he tried to escape, was bum-rushed so fast as he tried to make it to a steel-reinforced safe room, and then he was taken out. There were Venezuelan casualties. Donald Trump was watching the operation in a makeshift situation room in Mar-a-Lago, watching footage from a drone, we are told, so from up top. That's footage we have not seen. Clearly, Donald Trump said that the Venezuelans were ready for them, and of course they took dozens of casualties, so the Americans were not messing about, frankly, and it was a successful operation. Donald Trump clearly emboldened by it. I think we saw that on his face, and we heard it in his words on board Air Force One last night as he flew back to Washington, D.C., riffing on what he might do next and who might be next on the target list for the United States. Colombia perhaps. He spoke about Greenland in an interview, again, prompting Denmark to say, listen, stop these threats. So widespread concern internationally about what Donald Trump does next. And the arguments continue, you know, globally, I suppose. I'm just looking at the feed again, Mark. The judge says you have the right to consult with consulate officials. Do you understand that? Nicolas Maduro answers, yes, we understand it, and we would like to have a consular visit to happen. The prosecutor says, we will arrange that. And the prosecutor says, one more item of housekeeping. And then the judge says, I direct the prosecution to comply with its obligation with, and then he goes on to mention a particular case, an obligation, he says, to disclose all discovery, whether admissible or not. Consequences for non-compliance can be dismissal of charges or the entire case. So the judge, that sounds to me like a warning to the prosecution. You need to lay out and make available the relevant material to the defense in this case. So some housekeeping from the judge, and the prosecutor replies to him, of course, Your Honor, the last thing the prosecution authorities want in this case is for Maduro to get off on a legal technicality, clearly, and the judge is giving them a very straight warning about that. So discussions taking place. Maduro wants consular access. The prosecution is telling him that will be provided. Maduro and his wife speaking in Spanish in court. What we're reading is a translation of that. Maduro, it says, is moving around in his seat, leaning over to look at the papers. He didn't look in the best of health, Nicolas Maduro, when he was led to the helicopter this morning. He was limping, rather, in beige prison garb, braced against the cold of a New York January morning. But that's him in court, moving around in his seat, having pled not guilty and reasserted his belief that he remains the president of Venezuela.
James, for the moment, thank you. I want to stay across this, so if we could come back to you in just a moment. It is worth stating at this point that Nicolas Maduro and his wife are appearing in court in New York. Now, quite often in the United States, in a court in the United States, there are cameras, and we would be watching this, but in this case that is not happening. So James Matthews is reading from a transcript that is a document that is being released in real time, if you like, and he is reading from that. So he will continue to read from that, and it sounds as if the court case might be, or the arraignment hearing I should say, might be winding up. But in the meantime, let's bring in Rick De La Torre, or De La Torre, I hope one of those is right, who the former Caracas chief of station for the CIA. So an interesting man to talk to about what went on. And first of all, what is it like, Rick, to see Nicolas Maduro in handcuffs entering a New York court?
It warms my heart. It really does. For the first time in a long time, we're starting to see a real shift in the politics of that region. For too many years, I think, my own personal criticism, for too many years, I think, and rightfully so after 9/11, where we were focused on combating terrorism in other parts of the world, we really turned our backs on Latin America in a lot of way here from the United States. And what that did is that created a vacuum where countries like China, Russia, Iran, and others were able to play in that sphere. What Nicolas Maduro has been doing for many years now is opening up his country, extending that welcome mat to all these adversaries who then step in, create chaos in the region, export terrorism, deal in human trafficking, deal in drug sales, corruption, all on the backs of Venezuelans. So this is a great day, I think, a great day for Venezuelans. It's a great day for the region. I think it sends a very clear message to state leaders and those in power that you need to do right by your people and not engage in relationships with co-terrorists.
Yes, and talking about the operation itself, that would have been, what, months in the planning? What would that have looked like? And presumably there was someone inside the regime helping the CIA.
Right. So I won't go into any of those sorts of details, but I can tell you, obviously, that this kind of planning is not just something that happens overnight. It isn't something that when the president gives the order, then people start to come up with ideas. Then there are templates. There's certainly something that's been going on for a number of years as just a matter of practice. Sadly, what's happened in Venezuela, it truly is. Our term, the wild, wild west in many parts of Venezuela, especially along the Colombian border, where there's really no control whatsoever. You have these little fiefdoms of warlords. So bringing that under control has always been something that I think we've had contingency plans for because of its natural threat to its neighbors and to us. So the planning starts months earlier, obviously. It focuses on patterns of life, where the objective or the target is, what's the security situation, and then that information is passed over to our colleagues in the Department of War. They go about and do their planning with their special forces, and then along the way, what you had, particularly in this operation, which I found just absolutely amazing, was this great collaboration and cooperation across multiple agencies, multiple departments that were able to carry out this operation with very, very limited casualty. Well, certainly casualties to Venezuelans, let me say, because a great number of his personal bodyguards were just members of the Cuban intelligence organization.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it was the right thing to do? There is so much criticism we're hearing from many countries that it is illegal under international law. Do you think it was in any way legal to do this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I kind of scratch my heads on this. So many countries over the years have said that they don't recognize Nicolas Maduro as the leader of that country. In fact, there were two elections recently in Venezuela where he did not win that election, and that was certified by international observers in many other countries. So now we have a person who is using a sovereign state as an excuse to run a criminal enterprise that poisons not just the United States, but obviously Europe and the rest of the world too. That opens its doors to the aggression of Russians, Chinese, Iranians, and others. This doesn't make sense, especially in our backyard. So this president and this administration has said that obviously we've been asleep at the wheel for a number of years regarding the Western Hemisphere. That's not the case moving forward anymore. That simply isn't. So his removal under at least our system of justice is perfectly acceptable and legal. The operations that you saw carried out the other day, the United States has carried out these operations in the past with much fanfare, both domestically and internationally. So I think we have some politicians, particularly here in the United States, that are either willfully ignorant of our U.S. Constitution and the laws that we live under and abide to, and then there are others who actually work, or like to say these things to create some sort of dialogue and chaos within ourselves.
Okay, Rick, thank you very much indeed. All the focus on that courthouse you can see there. James Matthews, it's excuse me, outside for us. And James, the court hearing, this arraignment hearing still going on. What more is being said?
Yeah, it is, Mark. We've had the not guilty plea by Nicolas Maduro and his wife, Cillia Flores. Right now, they are essentially talking through where they go from here and how this proceeds. They're talking about March the 17th as a next date, looking at approximately 60 days for updates. So to be confirmed, but it looks like this will be knocked into March. Nicolas Maduro is, according to his lawyer, not seeking release at this time without prejudice to a bail application. So right now, he appears not to be seeking bail, and that goes for his wife as well. Barry Pollack, the attorney for Nicolas Maduro, says this, and I'm reading again from this written transcript from inside court. He says, "There are some health and medical issues. If there is a medical form, I'd like to fill that out so he gets the appropriate medical help while in detention." And the attorney for Cillia Flores, he says she has severe bruising on her rib and will need appropriate attention. The judge says, well, please work that out with Mr. Warshaw, the prosecutor, and the judge says, I will see you again on March the 17th, 11 a.m. So it sounds to me like the judge is wrapping it up and setting the next court date for 17th of March. Barry Pollack leans over Maduro to chat as Nicolas Maduro gathers his papers. He stops and turns to the gallery before he is escorted out of the courtroom along with his wife. So there you go, Mark. It sounds like it has wrapped up. Nicolas Maduro has made his appearance in court, lasting just over half an hour. Started at midday, typically short, an arraignment hearing at which the indictment is read to the accused and co-accused. And now we had it, charges with drug running at the heart of it. More than 20 pages on the indictment as a whole, which paints a very dark picture of Nicolas Maduro as a dictator who abused his position to run drugs into the United States. That's a prosecution case laid against him. It's a prosecution case that will proceed over a considerable period of time. 17th of March is the next court date. No bail for Maduro or his wife. They will be taken back to the MDC in Brooklyn across the East River, transported, one assumes, again by a combination of vehicle and helicopter across the East River into that industrial corner of Brooklyn to the high security, notorious for its conditions, MDC, Metropolitan Detention Center. So Maduro bedding in for the long term. He's pled not guilty. He stood up in court in Spanish, said, "I am a decent man," and asserted that he continues to be the president of Venezuela.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? The defiance of Maduro. He keeps standing up, hasn't he? I mean, he stood up when the judge said there will be a time and place for all this. This is getting the full indictment. But I only want to know one thing. Are you Nicolas Maduro? And Maduro stands up and says, "I am the president of Venezuela. I was captured at my home in Caracas, Venezuela." And then the judge says, "You have the right to read the entire indictment." Maduro gets up again. "I did not know all about these rights. I need to know these rights." And then says, "I am not guilty. I am a decent man. I am still the president of my country." So James very much using this to state his position to the outside world.
Yeah, it's the one opportunity he has, isn't it? Because Nicolas Maduro is a prisoner kept out of public view, who doesn't have a voice when he is in that jail across the East River. This was his opportunity to enter the debate. I suppose we've heard from politicians in Venezuela, we've heard from politicians in the United States, we've heard all sorts of views about Venezuela, where it's going. Nicolas Maduro, this was his opportunity to assert his view, and that is that he remains in charge, albeit not in power. That's a reality for him. And I think, Mark, in terms of the theatre of it all, Maduro getting to his feet to speak, we have an individual, don't we, who has been humiliated. He has been brought to court in handcuffs, in beige prison garb, wearing an orange and blue shirt. He is the accused. He's sitting in a dock, in an environment where, you know, the public gallery is full of journalists, sitting in front of a judge. I suppose as a defendant with dignity, he wants to assert a dignity and a status and a stature. And I suppose that is the reason that perhaps he chose to stand up, not sit down, slumped 2 seats away from his wife. You know, presentation is all important from a man of his standing and position, and he will have felt that very keenly, I think, over the past 48 hours. The humiliation of it all, the reduced circumstances of a man who considers himself still to be the president of the United States, reduced to the kind of sights that we've seen over the course of the day, being escorted to a helicopter, you know, as I say, in handcuffs, and being taken to this court building, which is, you know, these are not comfortable surroundings. I mean, he's very much not in charge of his own destiny when he enters that building. That's down to people around him. That will be down to a jury come the day when he faces trial. And as I say, that's some considerable time away, possibly a year before he sits down and the trial kicks off in front of, well, members of the public in New York, I suppose, who will fill that jury box. Matters very much to be decided in due course. But in terms of the courtroom process, March the 17th, 11 a.m. is the date to put in your diary. Between now and then, Nicolas Maduro, he wants access to consular representation. He wants to communicate with Venezuelans, and clearly what he will communicate to them is what he communicated inside that courtroom. that he's still the man. He's still the president of Venezuela, despite the fact that many would disagree.
It's interesting, James, that Nicolas Maduro is being represented by Barry Pollock, who has just been talking about issues about the legality of the military abduction, suggesting that is going to be part of all this. And I'm just reading here that Mr. Pollock has had various notable successes in his career, including a recently negotiated plea agreement that resulted in the immediate release from prison of long-time client Julian Assange, in that case publisher of WikiLeaks, who had been charged with violating the Espionage Act for publishing that classified information leaked by Chelsea Manning. So it's quite clear from his words, the person representing him, that Nicolas Maduro is, and his wife, they are both going to fight this.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mark. Over the course of the morning, that's clearly a situation that has evolved, because 1-2 hours ago it looked like Nicolas Maduro would be reduced to having a public defender represent him. Basically a public defender, as in somebody plucked from the pool of jobbing lawyers in the court building and assigned to the case. Imagine taking that call. Your job today on this Monday morning, back at work after the festive break, is to represent the man who calls himself the president of Venezuela. Quite the task for anybody. But Barry Pollock has been given that job, certainly for today, and it looks very much like he will be representing him going forward. High profile himself, Barry Pollock, because of his success in the courtroom, particularly with Julian Assange. That was a considerable result for him, securing the release of Assange after so many years behind bars. Part of that was spent in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, of course. And yeah, he did mention issues with the legality of what took place in Venezuela. And it wouldn't surprise me at all, Mark, if that was the thrust of the offence, the legality of the operation, whether or not Venezuela's sovereignty was violated in all of this, and whether or not, as the head of state of another country, he should enjoy immunity from prosecution. I expect that to be a strand pursued by Barry Pollock, the defence attorney for Nicolas Maduro. I mean, that will be fleshed out in due course, naturally. But right now, I suppose it's all about what comes next. I mean, what comes next in practical terms would appear to be medical treatment, actually, for Mr. Maduro and for his wife. We heard that in court, that both appear to require medical attention, and that will be afforded to them. Severe bruising to her ribs, that appears to be the issue with Cillia Flores. That needs appropriate attention, we were told. And I suppose that's no surprise, given the circumstances of their capture at the hands of US Special Forces. I'm hearing a helicopter up above, Mark, and just looking around, there are various police vehicles, flying drones in this street. I suppose from now we await the exit from court of Nicolas Maduro, and again it will be something of a duplicate, I imagine, of what we saw earlier this morning. Exit at the back in the Bearcat, the armoured vehicle, possibly to the helipad on the banks of the East River, and thereafter a helicopter trip to a football field, a soccer field next to the prison, and then onward into the MDC itself. We'll see that in due course. I imagine we will get pictures of it. And again, these aren't pictures you would get in many places. You wouldn't get them in the UK, because one of the security stipulations would be that the airspace above something like this would be banned, no access to media organizations. It's a free-for-all in terms of the media here. The pictures of Nicolas Maduro, president of Venezuela, humiliated, in prison garb, head bowed, limping in the hands of drugs enforcement agents. These are the pictures the Trump administration want you to be looking at. What they didn't like, Mark, and we're told this by a White House official this morning, were pictures that Maduro was putting of himself on social media dancing. And they viewed that inside the White House as an overt snub. They didn't like that. The man they wanted to surrender was seen to be offending and insulting the White House administration, and we are told that that fed in to the decision-making to go in, capture him, take him out, and take him here.
Yes, I can confirm, which you more or less have, that he has left the court. He's been escorted out of the courtroom along with his wife. Before he did so, Barry Pollock, his lawyer, leant over to Maduro, chatted to Maduro as they gathered up their papers. And then Maduro stopped on the way out, turned to the gallery, had a look around, but was then escorted out of the courtroom along with his wife. And as you say, the next thing we'll see could well be that helicopter heading back over to Brooklyn. As we understand it then, James, this is over. What comes next in this legal case?
What comes next, Mark, is the defence working through the charges and assessing where they take the defence case. On what grounds can they defend Nicolas Maduro? And like I say, I imagine the legality of the military operation will be at the heart of that, whether or not the United States is legally entitled to do what it did. And on that basis, the defence will surely try to have the case thrown out. That will be the subject of the early discussions when it comes, when it returns to court. If they don't get the quick result, and if there is a ruling on the legality of the legal operation, and if that favours the prosecution, then we would proceed towards a trial, and then it would be put towards a jury, the full indictment, a number of charges, and again, drug running is at the heart of that, and the drug running is the charge that includes his wife. So I think that's legally where it will go from here. Whether or not there can be a trial, or whether or not there are not sufficient legal grounds for the United States to have gone into Caracas and lifted him out. If that is deemed to be illegal, then, well, that's a big decision for everybody concerned. Technically, I suppose, Nicolas Maduro will say, well, it's illegal, therefore I can go home, and he would see himself resuming power. I think he made that much clear in his statements in court. Again, standing to make his statements, wearing headphones, listening to a translation. He spoke in Spanish when he spoke to the judge, addressing the judge. Alvin Hellerstein asserted his innocence. He was asked, how do you plead not guilty? He said, emphatically repeated the fact, said he was a decent man, said that he remained the president of Venezuela. Well, he's a president of Venezuela. In his mind, he is certainly a prisoner of the United States, and that's a status that he will assume once more when he's taken back to the Metropolitan Detention Center. I was round there yesterday, Mark, this place that has housed high-profile accused individuals, Ghislaine Maxwell, Sean Diddy Coombs, Sam Bankman-Fried, the crypto fraudster. They've all been in there. When you go close to the door of this place, you can actually hear the sounds from inside, shouting, conversations. I had doors closing, furniture being moved around. That's what it sounded like. It sounded quite boisterous in there, actually, but I suppose I was hearing the sound of the general population of that place. These are not the individuals that Nicolas Maduro will be mixing with. There is a special housing unit within the institution, which is where he will surely be taken to give a degree of separation from other inmates, as much for his safety and security as anything else. That's not to say that that won't be difficult for him. You know, that degree of isolation, I suppose, would test any individual. But that's the reality for him for the foreseeable future, certainly for the next 60 days, because that's the time that it will take this to come back to court on March the 17th. He didn't make an application for bail today, nor did his wife, Cillia Flores. The attorneys for both made that clear that they weren't doing that, but they did say, and they emphasized, that medical attention was needed for both. So, you know, it's the practicalities, it's the reality of detention, it's the reality of being an accused individual in a federal case in New York. It's the reality for a man who insists he's the president of Venezuela but won't be enjoying the trappings of a presidency for some considerable time.
Let's just bring viewers up to date with where we are. Nicolas Maduro and his wife have appeared in court in New York, in that courthouse behind James Matthews there. Now, our correspondent Martha Kellner was inside court, and we're expecting her to appear shortly, not appear in court shortly, but appear outside shortly, to talk to James Matthews about what Nicolas Maduro's demeanour was and so forth. What we do know from his words are that his demeanour is pretty defiant. He says, "I am not guilty, I am a decent man, I am still president of my country." And his wife, Cillia Flores Maduro, said, "I am not guilty, I am the First Lady of Venezuela." So real defiance. And James, it's worth saying that the Americans, certainly the American representative at the United Nations Security Council in the last hour or so, has kind of set out what the American case here will be, insisting that it was a law enforcement operation, essentially, with military backing against what he called 2 indicted fugitives. There was no war, he says. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation, the arrest of a narco trafficker. So that presumably sets out what the American case will be, a case that they will have to make in the face of many other countries, some people within the United States as well, saying that this was an illegal military operation. But it does seem that the representative to the UN Security Council was setting out what the Americans are going to be saying about all this.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Mark. A law enforcement action, that's the label that they are pinning on this, the Americans, because that offers a legal justification for it. Critics would say there absolutely is no legal justification, because this was a clear breach of international law as recognised globally through time. It's interesting that Donald Trump, when we first learned about this in the early hours of Saturday morning, it was a Truth Social post. What else? Donald Trump mentioned law enforcement in that post, and it was interesting because he was clearly keen to assert that. One wonders if there was a legal advice on that particular one, because that is a thread that has carried through the Americans' legal justification for this. The counter view, of course, and you know, we heard it at the United Nations. We have heard it on Capitol Hill. That view is that this was far more than a law enforcement action. This was, well, in the words of Hakeem Jeffries,
Yeah, James, I'm just going to interrupt you. Apologies for doing that, but we can now see, we have pictures, or we did just a moment ago, there it is again, of of the van that is believed to contain Nicolas Maduro and his wife. And as you say, James, it is the journey back to this detention center in Brooklyn, whether they're transferred again by helicopter or it's done entirely by road remains to be seen. What would it be, James? A journey of about 5 miles or so across Brooklyn Bridge back to that detention center you were outside?
Yeah, I suspect it will be helicopter. That's my guess, Mark. I think we will see a repeat of this morning's events. And to take him and her over the Brooklyn Bridge, that would be a huge logistical exercise, apart from anything else, hugely disruptive, and that would increase the risk. I think the helicopter would reduce the time that they are in the public gaze, and that will be key among this. So I suspect the Bearcat along that road, which has been closed for the convoy, a helipad on the banks of the East River, and then onward to that football field next to the Metropolitan Detention Center. I mean, the Brooklyn Bridge, it has been used in the past. El Chapo, the drug lord, they closed the Brooklyn Bridge for him to make this same journey between prison and court. But it's disruptive. I mean, this is New York. This is a Monday in New York. So I suspect they will want to avoid that. This strikes me, or the helicopter option would appear to be the safest, most secure method of passage back to that prison cell. And of course, that trip by helicopter, Mark, tourists pay good money for that because it takes you close to the Manhattan skyline. You get a view of the Statue of Liberty. I wonder if the irony will not be lost on the Maduros as they make that trip and gaze over to Lady Liberty, who is not smiling on them today. But that's the journey, that's the route. The destination is a place they don't want to be in. Notorious institution, high security, a federal prison, a place used for people who are accused in federal cases. They will be shuttling between there and here over the course of, well, the coming year and possibly years to come, depending on how long this process takes. So I'm just watching pictures of that convoy, Mark, the white van with military personnel in military fatigues with weapons ready, and that Bearcat, the bottle green armoured vehicle. That's the vehicle that contains the Maduros in the back seats, handcuffed, in prison garb, making their way back towards the MDC.
Yeah, James, it's interesting. The next court appearance set for, what was it, March sometime, March the 17th, I think. But it looks like they will plead not guilty, or they say they're going to plead not guilty, or they have pleaded not guilty, in fact. It could be a very long process, couldn't it?
Yeah. Could take something like a year before any trial takes place. And I think I'm right, Mark. That looks like they're heading towards the helipad on the banks of the East River, which would mean helicopter transport. But you see the the passenger ferry, which is docked alongside. I do wonder what the security arrangements are in the context of that, and public access to the area that will be used to transport the Maduros. That will be a key consideration in all of this. but it's something like half a mile from there to the MDC federal prison, which is in a part of Brooklyn that for so long was the industrial corner of that borough of New York. Not so much these days. It has been rather gentrified, but the prison, it's out of the way. At one end there's a flyover, at the other there is a refuse depot, so there's much going on. There is much movement, but yesterday I was struck by how there was actually no outward sign, little outward sign of this high caliber prisoner who was inside. There was, yes, people in military fatigues with weapons, but he was clearly well ensconced inside, and upon his return he will be well ensconced once more.